Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment when your silence becomes louder than every word he ever ignored. When he pulled away, you didn't chase, you went quiet. And that quiet, it terrified him. Because silence isn't weakness, it's power. It's the moment he realizes the attention he took for granted has vanished. The moment he feels your absence more deeply than he ever appreciated your presence. Silence isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of your power. When a man pulls away, it's easy to feel panic rise inside you. You replay every conversation, every moment, wondering what went wrong. But his withdrawal isn't always about you. It's often about his fears, ego, or inability to process emotion. And the most powerful thing you can do is not chase clarity, but choose silence. Silence speaks the language of strength. It's emotional intelligence in action. It's not about indifference, it's self-respect over validation. When you stop responding to distance, you stop rewarding inconsistency, you stop feeding what drains you. And that's when everything changes. When he expects you to chase, but you don't, it disrupts the pattern. It tells him without words that you're not afraid to walk away from confusion. That's not detachment, it's dignity. Your silence shifts the entire dynamic. Men pull away to test control, to see if you'll fight for their attention. But when you go silent, you create a psychological void, a vacuum where your absence becomes undeniable. At first, he feels relief, but soon that relief turns into reflection. He starts missing your warmth, your laughter, your energy. Silence makes him face his own feelings without your reassurance. That's when realization begins to grow. Your silence isn't a game, it's a statement. The ego that once felt powerful now feels exposed. He starts asking, did I push too far? Did I lose her for good? Because your silence removes his control. It forces him to see that your love was never owed, it was offered. And when he feels the void of your presence, regret begins to whisper. That's the turning point where reflection replaces pride. Silence works because it's rare. In a world where everyone rushes to fill gaps with words, explanations, or reactions, silence has become almost unnatural. People are so used to noise, verbal noise, emotional noise, digital noise, that when someone stays still and doesn't react, it creates an emotional contrast that feels powerful and unsettling at the same time. Most people are afraid of silence because silence leaves room for thought, reflection, and awareness. And awareness can be uncomfortable. That's why silence stands out. It doesn't compete for attention, yet it demands it. It's not about ignoring someone or withholding affection. It's about being comfortable enough with yourself to not need to prove your value through constant response. Silence shows composure. It signals that you are centered within yourself, that you are not controlled by impulse or emotion. And because of that, it immediately commands attention. When someone feels ignored, their instinct is to chase, to prove their worth, to seek validation through action. That's human nature. We want to fix what feels broken. We want to restore what feels uncertain. But that reaction often has the opposite effect. When you chase, you send the message that your emotional state depends on the other person's response. You give away your power. The moment you feel ignored and respond with desperation or over-explanation, you confirm to the other person that their actions control you. But silence disrupts that pattern completely. When you remain calm and composed in the face of distance or indifference, it changes the entire dynamic. It shows emotional restraint, not because you're detached or don't care, but because you've learned that reacting from fear only weakens your position. Silence allows you to stand in your own energy instead of giving it away to someone who may not value it. Silence doesn't mean you're suppressing your feelings. It means you've developed the maturity to feel everything, confusion, pain, longing, without letting those emotions dictate your behavior. That self-control is rare and magnetic because it reflects inner peace. It tells the other person that while you might care deeply, you won't abandon your dignity to prove it. And that kind of restraint creates respect. Most people operate from reaction. They get triggered and respond instantly. But when you can feel emotion without immediately acting on it, you communicate something deeper. That your emotions no longer control you. You control them. And that control gives you presence. It's the calm confidence of someone who doesn't need chaos to feel alive. It's the quiet power that says, I'm secure enough in myself to wait and watch rather than chase and panic. When you stay silent, people begin to feel your absence in a way that words could never create. The human mind is naturally drawn to mystery. When something or someone that was once consistent suddenly becomes still, it creates curiosity. They begin to wonder what changed. Did they lose your interest? Did they go too far? Have they been replaced? Silence plants those questions quietly in the back of their mind. It triggers introspection. And that's where the real shift happens. not because you manipulated them, but because you created a space for them to notice your worth without your words demanding it. Silence invites reflection, while chasing invites resistance. When you chase, you push them further away because your energy feels heavy, anxious, and demanding. But when you stay still, your energy becomes magnetic. It pulls them in because it feels stable, rare, and self-contained. That stillness communicates that your world doesn't revolve around their validation. You're not waiting for their approval to feel whole. You have your own life, your own rhythm, your own peace. And paradoxically, that's what makes them start paying attention again. People are attracted to confidence, and real confidence is quiet. It doesn't need to announce itself. It's not built on pride or arrogance. It's rooted in self-trust. When your silence comes from a place of trust, trust that what's meant for you won't pass you by, it radiates a calm energy that others can feel. It's not about indifference. It's about security. You're saying without words, I know my value and I don't need to prove it to you. That unspoken message carries more weight than any conversation could. Silence also exposes intentions. When you stop chasing, the other person has to reveal whether they truly care or if they were only responding to your effort. Your silence acts as a mirror. It reflects truth. If someone values you, they will feel the distance and come forward with clarity. If they don't, they'll disappear. Either way, your silence gives you the answer, and it gives it without confrontation, without arguments, without drama. It filters out confusion and replaces it with truth. That's why silence is a form of emotional intelligence. It's not passive, it's active restraint, the conscious choice to hold your peace instead of forcing an outcome. Because real strength isn't in reacting quickly, it's in responding wisely. It's in understanding that sometimes the best way to get clarity is to stop speaking and start observing. Over time, silence becomes its own language. It says, I'm not angry, I'm aware, I'm not distant, I'm discerning, I'm not ignoring you, I'm protecting my peace. This is the difference between emotional reactivity and emotional maturity. Maturity is knowing that you don't need to control every situation through words. You can let things unfold naturally and trust that what's real will remain. That doesn't mean you're passive. It means you're powerful enough to stay calm in uncertainty. And that calmness is magnetic because it's rooted in self-assurance, not fear. People are drawn to stability because it makes them feel safe. When your energy is peaceful, it signals that you're not operating from need, but from choice. You're choosing to stay silent not to punish, but to preserve your energy. And that choice earns quiet respect. Silence also creates mystery. In a world where everyone overshares, where emotions spill out through texts, posts, and calls, being silent makes you stand out. It makes people wonder what's going on in your mind. That curiosity draws them in because silence creates a space they want to fill. But the power lies in not rushing to fill it for them. You allow them to approach, to question, to reach out, and when they do, they're doing it from their own desire, not your pressure. That shift changes everything. Instead of you chasing connection, they begin to re-engage because they feel the loss of your presence. That's the subtle art of emotional gravity. Silence pulls people in not by force, but by contrast. Ultimately, silence shows who can meet you halfway and who only came for attention. When you stop giving constant reassurance, those who were only feeding off your energy will fade away because they can no longer get the reaction they depended on. But the ones who value you will step up. They'll recognize that your silence isn't coldness, it's respect. Respect for yourself, respect for the connection, and respect for truth. You're no longer entertaining confusion or inconsistency. You've set a quiet boundary that says, if you care, show it. If not, I'm at peace either way. That level of self-possession is what makes silence so powerful. It's not about control, it's about clarity. You no longer need to prove your worth to anyone. You simply embody it. And when your peace becomes louder than your reaction, that's when people finally start to listen. When he finally reaches out again, everything inside you feels different. The old version of you might have jumped to respond, eager for closure, connection, or reassurance. But now something has shifted. You no longer react out of desperation. You respond from self-assurance. You've spent enough time in silence to realize that peace is not the absence of love. It's the presence of self-respect. You've learned that the calm you cultivated during his absence was not emptiness, but strength. You no longer crave chaos to feel alive. Instead, you've grown comfortable in your stillness. Understanding that peace is the truest measure of power. It's not loud, it's not forceful, and it doesn't beg to be seen. It simply exists within you, unshaken by what someone else decides to do or not do. When he comes back, you can feel that the dynamic has changed. You're not waiting for him to define your worth anymore because you've already done that for yourself. The silence that once felt heavy has become your anchor, grounding you in self-assurance instead of anxiety. You understand now that silence was never a punishment, it was protection. You weren't trying to hurt him or play games. You were giving yourself space to breathe, to see clearly, and to stop pouring energy into a place where it wasn't being received. Your silence was your way of stepping back from emotional noise and returning to balance. It was you saying, without words, I value my peace too much to beg for what should flow naturally. That's not coldness, it's clarity. When you protect your energy, you're choosing to preserve the parts of yourself that once got lost in overgiving. You realize how often you gave your time, your softness, and your empathy to someone who wasn't ready to meet you with the same depth. The silence you kept wasn't about withholding love. It was about rediscovering your boundaries. You learned that love should never cost you your peace. It should expand you, not drain you. So when you chose silence, you weren't shutting him out. You were turning inward, reconnecting with the parts of you that needed healing. When he finally reaches out again, you no longer carry the same emotional charge. The anxiety, the overthinking, the waiting, they're gone. You don't need to rehearse what to say or how to act because you're no longer performing for approval. You found your voice in your quiet. Now, when you speak, your words come from a grounded place. You understand that if someone truly values you, they'll feel your absence and move toward you with sincerity, not because you demanded it, but because your silence revealed it. That's the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is driven by fear, fear of losing someone, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being forgotten. Response, on the other hand, comes from peace. It's calm, measured, and detached from outcome. You've learned that your role isn't to convince anyone to stay. It's to remain true to your own emotional balance. So when he returns, you can look at him and see him clearly, not through the fog of longing, but through the lens of self-awareness. Silence taught you patience. It taught you how to sit with uncertainty and realize that not everything unresolved needs immediate fixing. You discovered that sometimes the best way to protect love is to step back from it until both people are ready to meet each other equally. Silence gave you perspective. It allowed you to observe patterns, both his and your own, and understand where you were giving too much and receiving too little. It gave you space to recognize that chasing someone's attention only exhausts the love that should feel effortless. So now, when you stand before him again, your energy has changed. You no longer approach with emotional hunger. You approach with quiet confidence. You no longer ask, why did you pull away? Because your silence already gave you the answer. You understand that people who truly care won't need to be reminded how to show up, and those who needed your absence to realize your worth may never have deserved your constant presence to begin with. You've learned that your peace is your power. It's not found in control, not in persuasion, and not in reaction. It's found in the calm acceptance that you can't force someone to meet you where they're not ready to go, and that realization is liberating. You no longer see love as a battlefield to win or lose. You see it as a reflection of alignment. If he can meet you with presence, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, then there's space for connection. But if he can't, you'll meet yourself with peace. That sentence becomes your mantra. If you can't meet me with presence, I'll meet myself with peace. It's a declaration of independence from emotional dependency. It says you're done sacrificing your sanity for someone else's uncertainty. It says that you value your own energy too deeply to keep giving it to someone who treats it carelessly. When you choose peace, you stop needing closure from others because you've already given it to yourself. You realize that peace isn't something anyone can hand you. It's something you build internally through boundaries, awareness, and acceptance. You stop waiting for apologies, explanations, or validation because those things no longer define your worth. Your self-assurance becomes unshakable. You can care about someone and still walk away. You can love them and still let them go because peace isn't the absence of love. It's the ability to love without losing yourself. That's what makes it so powerful. It's quiet but unbreakable. It's gentle but firm. It's soft yet strong. And that balance is what you've earned through your silence. So when he finally reaches out, you meet him not with resentment or eagerness, but with composure. You can listen without attachment. You can speak without expectation. You can love without losing your sense of self. That's what silence has given you, the ability to stay open without being vulnerable to chaos. You now understand that protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's sacred, because your peace is your foundation. Without it, love turns into survival. But with it, love becomes choice. And when you love from choice, not fear, it transforms the entire experience. You stop needing to be chosen because you've already chosen yourself. That's why this kind of strength feels so pure. It's not loud, it's not defensive, it doesn't need to prove anything. It's quiet, grounded, and deeply rooted in self-respect. You don't need to punish him, ignore him, or prove you've moved on. Your silence has already spoken the truth, that your peace is too valuable to compromise. When he sees that, he'll recognize that something about you has changed. You've outgrown the version of yourself that begged for clarity. You've evolved into someone who radiates it naturally. You no longer chase connection, you attract it. You no longer wait for love to validate you, you embody it. That's what strength in its purest form looks like. Not control, not dominance, but balance. The ability to stand in your truth without losing your softness, to protect your peace without closing your heart, to love deeply without abandoning yourself. That's the silent power that changes everything. Silence isn't empty, it's full. It holds more power than words can often carry. It's not a void or a pause, it's a presence, a state of being so complete that it no longer seeks validation from noise. Silence carries the weight of strength, the kind that doesn't need to be proven. When you choose silence, you're not disappearing, you're becoming centered. You're stepping into the space where clarity lives. It's in silence that you finally hear yourself, that your thoughts slow down enough for truth to rise to the surface. The world often tells you to speak, to explain, to fight for understanding, but silence says something different. It says that you already understand. It's the confidence of knowing that your worth doesn't depend on being seen or heard every moment. It's the realization that you don't need to respond to everything that disturbs your peace. Silence is full because within it lies control, awareness, and dignity. It's the strength to observe rather than react, to think before you speak, to choose calm when chaos calls your name. Self-respect is one of the things that fills silence the most. When you stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you, you reclaim your power. Silence becomes the language of self-worth. It's not silence born from fear, it's silence born from knowledge. You've learned that not everyone deserves access to your words, not every situation requires your reaction. Some things are best left untouched, some arguments not worth winning. Your self-respect whispers to you that walking away quietly is sometimes louder than shouting your side. And as you learn this, you begin to move differently. You no longer waste energy convincing anyone of your value because you finally know it. You've seen how your silence unsettles those who once thrived on your emotional responses. You've noticed how peace unsettles people who only understand conflict. You start to see that silence doesn't mean defeat. It means you've risen above the noise. Clarity, too, is born in silence. When you stop speaking, you start seeing. When you stop explaining, you start understanding. The quiet reveals what noise tries to hide, the truth about people, situations, and yourself. You begin to see who respects your silence and who mistakes it for weakness. You notice who reaches out without being asked and who disappears when your energy is no longer feeding them. Silence becomes a filter that removes the unnecessary. It doesn't just clarify your relationships, it clarifies your priorities. In the stillness, you realize what actually matters and what was only ever a distraction. You learn to let go not because you stopped caring, but because you care more about your peace than about proving your point. You find freedom in restraint, realizing that silence gives you perspective that words can blur. You start understanding that not everything needs closure, not everything needs confrontation. Sometimes the most powerful closure is quiet acceptance, because the day you realized your voice doesn't always need to be heard to make an impact, that was the day you became truly unstoppable. You discovered a new kind of strength, one that doesn't depend on external validation. You stopped speaking just to be understood and started embodying the peace that no longer needs to be explained. You found out that impact doesn't always come from volume, it comes from presence. You can walk into a room and say nothing, yet still be felt. You can withdraw your energy and still be remembered. You realize that silence can shift energy in ways words never could. You no longer chase acknowledgement because your worth is no longer tied to being seen or heard. You've reached a point where your silence speaks for you. It communicates confidence, stability, and self-control. You don't have to announce your growth. It shows in how you no longer react to what once disturbed you. You became unstoppable the moment you understood that silence is not submission, it's strategy. It's the language of those who have mastered themselves. That realization changes everything. You stop rushing to fill every silence in a conversation. Stop explaining your choices. Stop defending your peace. You begin to understand that true power doesn't demand attention, it draws it naturally. You no longer give explanations where they're not earned. You no longer argue to be right, you prefer to be at peace. You stop seeking closure from others because silence has already given it to you. It's in that transformation that you see how much of your old self was tied to needing to be heard. You once believed that being silent meant being unseen. But now you know silence makes you more visible than ever because it reveals what can't be hidden: your self-control, your confidence, your emotional maturity. Silence doesn't erase your presence, it amplifies it. It's the pause that makes the music more powerful. It's the breath that gives meaning to the words you do choose to say. You didn't lose him, you found yourself. That's the most profound truth silence brings. In the space where his absence once echoed, you discovered something you had forgotten: you. You realized that you were never really waiting for him. You were waiting to come home to yourself. You stopped looking outward for comfort and started building it within. You stopped asking, why did he leave? And started asking, why did I stay silent for so long about what I needed? You found that healing wasn't in his return. It was in your rediscovery. You found that the version of yourself who begged for understanding has been replaced by someone who radiates peace. You became whole again, not because he came back, but because you stopped abandoning yourself to chase someone else's love. In losing him, you stopped losing yourself. You started choosing yourself instead. That's the moment silence turned from emptiness into empowerment. And that's the power of silence. It's not about absence. It's about presence, the presence of self, of wisdom, of calm. It's the space where transformation happens quietly, without anyone noticing, until one day they realize you've changed. It's the boundary that doesn't need to be announced, the healing that doesn't need to be performed. It's the energy that says, I am enough without noise. Silence holds a sacred kind of confidence, one that doesn't waver even when tested. It allows you to see that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it simply sits still and lets the world catch up. Silence is where you meet yourself fully, where you stop running from the truth and start walking in alignment with it. It's not a weakness, it's wisdom. It's not avoidance, it's awareness. It's not emptiness, it's fullness, full of strength, full of clarity, full of self-respect. And once you've experienced that fullness, you can never go back to chasing noise because you've learned that silence, in its stillness, holds everything you were ever looking for. That's the moment you become unstoppable, not because you conquered anyone else, because you finally mastered yourself. And that's the purest power of all.